It's now 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the July 28, 2025 Planning Board meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. We all stand. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, second item on the agenda is the invocation. If you'll all please bow your heads with me, I'll pray. Dear Lord, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come here and gather and meet tonight on behalf of the town. We'd like to ask for your blessing over this meeting, and we'd also like to ask for your guidance and direction in the decisions we make tonight. For it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Item number 3, I'm going to refer to staff on this.
There was an unintended error in the version of the minutes that got published, so we would like to pull them from tonight's agenda, and we'll put them in next month's or the next time this board meets agenda, and they can be adopted at that point.
Okay. We will strike that from the agenda and have it on the next planning board meeting. All right. On to the regular agenda item. First up is TA 25-06.
Yes, good evening. This is a text amendment submitted by an applicant for the purpose of amending several sections of the land development ordinance in regards to the use of self-storage and to also modify options for the use of a development agreement. There are 4 specific sections of the land development ordinance that are sought to be changed by the applicant. Table 5.1, the permitted principal use table, section 5.1.4, the commercial principal uses, table 3.4.2, the activity center district development standards, and table 3.4.3, the neighborhood center district development standards. Currently, the use of, or the reference use or development of a self-storage type of use is captured under the industrial light zoning use. It's one that's listed as an example type or form of an industrial light use. And that is currently permitted in the districts of general industrial, GI, and business and technology, BT. The applicant is also asking to expand the language or use of a development agreement specific to the mixed-use districts. So this is just a bulleted item page here that shows where in the LDO development agreements are even mentioned. I won't go through them here, but we want to focus kind of towards the bottom there. There already is a piece of the regulations in the AC and the NC zoning districts where the LDO speaks to the allowance of a development agreement to be created by an applicant to modify just the small portion that's speaking to the timing of development. And timing of development in the mixed-use districts is all about delivery of the non-residential component of a project commensurate with the delivery of the residential. It's really built on the presumption that the residential will be built, but to ensure that some of the residential will come online at a certain point of time. It's all about square footages and numbers of permits issued for the residential component of a mixed-use project. So the use and reference of a development agreement is already in the LDOs. This is not a completely foreign topic to just impress upon that. And the bottom bullet there, Appendix A, Section 2.2 of the Land Development Ordinance, that lays out the process. So development agreements are a legislative review process. That means they get submitted, they get first reviewed by the Technical Review Committee, they come before this board, the Planning Board, for a review recommendation, then it goes to the Town Board for a legislative hearing to agree, to approve a development agreement on behalf of a developer. A development agreement is specific to that person's property. So it's a property-specific, project-specific type of development agreement that goes through the legislative process. So ultimately, development agreements are and have to be approved by the Board of Commissioners to become in effect. So this text amendment this evening, the first bullet here is to add the use, and the bold there says it would be called self-storage enclosed as a separate commercial use in Table 5.1 of the LDO, and then to list it as a permitted use in the zoning districts of general commercial, GC, highway commercial, CH, office and professional, OP, and NC, the neighborhood center zoning district. So recall the light industrial use was only permitted in GI and BT, or 2 zoning districts. This would pull that self-storage use out, make it a standalone, separate use, and then permit it in these 4 zoning districts. And these 4 zoning districts are less intense by zoning categories and general development standards than the GI and the BT. The GI and the BT are about the most intense zoning districts in the LDO. These are less intense. So it would be allowing self-storage in less intense zoning districts, whereas right now self-storage can only be performed as an example use under light industrial in heavier or more industrial type zoning districts. The second bullet, adding use standards that all the structures would receive uniform architectural treatment, and in essence, the gist of the applicant's submittal is that they would end up looking more like office buildings as opposed to a building that you would directly and immediately reference or know as indoor self-storage. The third bullet this is about the development agreement. So through a development agreement, the applicant would seek to allow the modification of minimum building setbacks, lot size, and building heights in the AC and the NC zoning districts, again, through an approved development agreement that would be approved by the Board of Commissioners. One of the reasons here is that the lot dimensions that are listed in these 2 mixed-use zoning districts are inherently for the residential portion of a mixed-use development. There's really a lack of guidance as to lot dimensions for non-residential buildings. So this would actually provide some level of clarification on lot dimensions for the non-residential buildings of a mixed-use zoning district development. In your packet is the actual text that the applicant submitted with the blue underlines showing you the changes. I don't have that for you on screen, but if you do want to look at your packets or recall from your packets the exact language, and that's what it would look like. It's the pages. I'm holding them up to the board at this moment for those at home, and so forth. So the tables with the blue underlined. Those are the edits that the applicant is proposing. Some of the review and the getting at the level of staff support. So the 2017 comprehensive plan has many objectives. These are bulleted here. These basically get to the point of the bigger picture visions for the town and how they might relate to expanding a specific type of use, the self-storage enclosed use, and then also giving a developer, through a development agreement, the ability to modify development standards on a case-by-case request of the Board of Commissioners. At the bottom of this slide, TA 2506, staff does feel that it would allow for a greater variety of services if the self-storage use was allowed in additional zoning districts. I'll go back to recall that as an example use of light industrial, it's only permitted in 2 zoning districts, GI and BT, and again, those are very intense zoning districts. There is no BT zoning in the town at this time. Nobody's rezoned to that zoning district, and that stands for business and technology. And there's only a few very small properties still zoned general industrial. So there's really no land on the ground zone to do industrial light and thus do self-storage uses. So pulling it out as a independent and more commercial connotated use would possibly facilitate it being developed in the town, because there are some properties that are zoned GC, maybe OP in the town. But again, most properties would have to go through the rezoning legislative process to achieve the zoning to even allow self-storage use, but at least it would be connotated as a commercial use and not an industrial use. This table here, on the left-hand side, this is basically bulletized the applicant's request in kind of 3 boxes. And on the right side is the staff analysis, which boils down to kind of the big picture recommendation that staff's making on this text amendment by the applicant. So I'll go through, I'll do the left side and then the right side. So again, the applicant is asking to add self-storage enclosed as a separate commercial use, and then allow that in the 4 zoning districts of GC, CH, OP, and NC. Staff does recommending, supports basically the request here, but also adding GI and BT to those zoning districts, which would match then where it already is permitted as again, example use under light industrial. So in the end, self-storage enclosed will be permitted in 6 zoning districts, not just the 4 that the applicant has stipulated. So in general, staff is in support of that component of this request. The second box add a use standard that all structures shall receive uniform architectural treatment and resemble an office building. Staff thinks it would be a little more simpler to just say that these uses would all follow LDO section 6.8.2, which are the non-residential building standards. From a practical standpoint, it would be very difficult for staff to approve an architectural plan that is connotated as being like an office building, because every office building is different. So just going more straightforward and following the form that's already in the LDO for non-residential buildings makes more sense to staff. And so that's how we would basically replace what they're asking for with their second box there, and just say that really don't have to change anything, because non-residential buildings would inherently already follow section 6.8.2 for non-residential building standards. This is getting at blank wall areas, the amount of transparency that a building must have, architectural features and things like that. The third box there on the bottom left is, so the applicant is seeking to change basically 3 standards: setbacks, lot sizes, and building height, only within the AC and NC zoning district, and only with an approved development agreement, which again would have to go through the legislative process and be approved by the Board of Commissioners. Staff's take on this, the first bullet here is just to state for the record kind of that development agreements are permitted under state law 160D, but the intent of a development agreement is to allow for the process for establishment and review of large-scale, multi-phase development projects with expected build-out over several years. So really not every project that's going to come forth through the town is going to meet those tenets and really qualify for a development agreement. Example, if a 5-acre tract that was just trying to do one use would come through, well, that would not be most likely multi-phase, it would not be large-scale, and it would not build out over several years. So some projects would lend themselves to using a development agreement, some others would not. And so that would probably be part of the vetting process when staff gets an application to determine, is this project even eligible for a development agreement under 160D? So that's to say that not all properties or projects could even undertake a development agreement. So while the use might be, the self-storage use might be permitted in zoning districts, their project and their property might not be eligible for actually pursuing a development agreement. There's some bars to meet and some standards to follow even before you could make that application. The second bullet there is that staff does recommend the planning board consider the use of a development agreement, but to adjust all the standards in the dimensional lot and use standards in the 3 mixed-use zoning districts. So the applicant has called out just the AC and the NC. There's a third mixed-use zoning district, the town center, or TC, which the board and the town might be more familiar because we have one TC zoning district on the ground at this point. So staff feels that amending this to allow all 3 mixed-use zoning districts and have all their development standards. So if you go back to the applicant's blue line, these pages here, table 3.4.2 and then 3.4.3 for the AC and the NC district. Just imagine if all of those standards were eligible to be modified by an applicant through a development agreement. That's what staff's getting at, as opposed to just the very specific 3 items of setbacks, lot size, and building height. So staff supports the applicant's request in general, but actually sees a benefits to expand that all to all the standards that could possibly be modified in each one of those zoning districts, plus including the TC or town center zoning district. So that's the end of my presentation at the moment. We have the motion slide here, but the applicant is present. They don't have a formal presentation here, but certainly they can use any slides that we have here and refer back to the packet there for their modified language examples. So if we could open up to the board, or if you'd like to call up the applicant.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have questions for staff or the applicant?
Yeah, I have one question with respect to the modifications. With setback, lot size, and building, since you're adding in the town center, my only concern is whether or not we should consider adding one more, I don't know if it's a condition or modification to where the structure would not be facing Main Street. I don't know if anybody feels that's, less appealing for, an office building storage unit to be right on Main Street, but as long as it's not like on Main Street and it's, one property back or whatever, it still might fall in town center because of the 500-foot rule I think town center uses across Main Street.
So the concern is with the use of self-storage enclosed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So certainly the LDO can be created with use standards which are, if in the use chart in chapter 5, you look on the right-hand side, it says, go to this section, 5 point something something. In there, that's where a locational or a geography limitation could be, that this use is not permitted to be property
Okay.
fronting,
So
within
that's where
500
that-
feet of.
That's where that would have to be added as opposed to where you have it right here.
That's right. It would be an inherent use standard for the use of self-storage enclosed.
Okay,
Forget about, the bottom text there and getting into, in the mixed-use zoning districts, et cetera. It would be an overarching use standard for self-storage enclosed.
so would that
Based on
mean that has to come back at a different time for adding that language, or?
You can make that part of your recommendation this evening if that's part of the board.
Okay.
And then, staff and the applicant could work that language in there, and that would be part of what would be proposed.
And that's what would then go to the town board for the, okay.
Go
Go ahead, no, I was just gonna say, that's just the only thing that I felt was, everything else I'm cool with. I just feel like it might not be ideal to have, a self-storage unit right on Main Street. Other than that, I'm cool with everything, so that would be my
If
input.
someone did propose one right on South Main Street, it would still have to adhere to the architectural standards of the town center zoning district, correct?
Sure. Well,
Or their appearance standards, whatever.
top left corner, like Hollywood Squares here. So self-storage enclosed would be permitted in GC, CH, OP, and NC if this were adopted for the applicant. And that staff even believes that it would be beneficial to do it in the GI and the BT zoning district. So if someone were to have GC zoning property and wish to do self-storage enclosed, today, without the caveat about the locational on Main Street, basically restriction, they could perform that use.
Right,
And they would have to follow all the development standards of the LDO, setbacks, height, et cetera. The modifications in the bottom left-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner, staff's kind of suggestion to actually expand that, would only be in the 3 mixed-use zoning districts.
where residential is part of it because of the, yeah, I got you on that.
And
Yeah,
by
yeah.
doing what mixed-use zoning district, you are almost inherently talking about a much larger, massive property,
Right.
which is not any of the properties along Main Street.
Right, right.
So it's a little bit self-protected just by our knowledge of our own town, but absolutely would be appropriate to add that as a use standard for self-storage enclosed,
Yeah.
which would apply if it's in GC or CH or OP or
Right.
just anything, and then would get to those protectionisms.
Yeah, I would put that out there as something for us to consider adding.
What would the
Kind of
distance?
a
you
friendly
feel?
amendment, so to speak, to the proposal.
I mean, anything that's not, like, literally, the property's not on Main Streets.
So more of an access road back to it, behind the other.
Yeah, as long as the elevation, isn't, however, the same way we word the 3 bays on the, whatever, same idea, I'm not worried about, it's just, I just worry about having this tall structure like the brick on the corner, the dentist, and the one that just came, a 3-story structure on the corner being a storage unit, and then, it just seems weird to have it there, but it also is like, it's also, if we're trying to do walkability, usability type of stuff, Main Street is where you want all those things that people are gonna be constantly interacting with, and it's more of a passive type of use type, so that would be my input on that.
Yeah, and I'm not against, keeping it back off of South Main Street either, because it is the gateway and the corridor through downtown.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to give you a recommendation of a distance, or is that something staff could word?
I think you could make a suggestion to basically devise language to disallow the use fronting on South or North Main Street. From, if you want to do certain extent points. There's already a Main Street corridor definition in the code, in the LDO. It kind of reflects a different specific standard, but if you wanted to mention that for the geography of it, I think that's clear intent for staff to go and work that in there. And we could add that language to it in consultation with the applicant too. Either they would want to work that in there, or we could just make that, again, kind of one of our right side analysis recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. And when it gets there, we think that there should be some additional language specific to the self-storage enclosed use, regardless of zoning district.
So I want to say that a lot of discussion went into the self-storage that is on Jones Dairy now. Where it was, how far back, what it looks like. The location was the biggest thing that we spent a lot of time on. So taking into consideration where those zoning areas are in town, I think we have to keep in mind that someone could put a self-storage unit wherever that is. You had said, which I need clarification on, that in the bottom right-hand box, somewhere in there, I thought you said that depending on the land, it would have to come back before the board anyway? What did I miss? I missed
Yeah.
something there.
Anyone exercising the choice to do a development agreement, that development agreement is a standalone legislative request of the Board of Commissioners.
So, but where it says, staff recommends the planning board consider the use of the development agreement to adjust
All
all
the
standards.
standards, yeah.
That's all the standards that are listed here on this chart, which I'm looking at here. So
It would be these standards which are in the code. So every number, would be eligible for a development agreement, whereas the applicant is asking for just 3 specific
Right.
types: setbacks, lot size, and building height.
So just so I understand, the development agreement would not automatically be connected to this amendment. They would still, every single developer that wanted a change would
Yeah.
still have to come back to the board.
To modify any of the standards that are in there.
Yeah.
Think of, if they don't do the bottom left and the bottom right box there, if the self-storage enclosed gets approved and is permitted in more zoning districts like GC or NC, the applicant can either choose to follow the rules as are currently adopted and in place, or if they want to tweak any of them, then they seek a development agreement as a side request of the board.
But with this text amendment, if this lot of land right here, they want to put self-storage on there, wherever this is in town, as long as they follow that, if it is passed, they can go ahead and don't need to come before the board unless they want additional changes.
Right.
That's the only time it will come before the board.
Right. If they find a GC zone property tomorrow and self-storage enclosed is permitted there, they move right to site plan.
And you said there's very few properties currently zoned that would allow that.
There's more GC out there than there is GI. I know that for sure.
Where are those GCs located?
Main Street, Rogers Road.
Is it down
Burlington
Rogers?
Mills.
I don't have the analysis done right to me, but I know that if GC zoning on undeveloped properties exists, it's on Main Street or Rogers Road.
Okay.
But there's really not that much, and they're really not that large. So.
But did you say they would have to be, the way it's written, it kind of has to be a larger property to utilize the development agreement to, because of the
Development agreement caveat or inclusion here is only in the 3 mixed-use zoning districts, which means you're inherently doing a residential neighborhood as the core of it, but you're also doing something non-residential.
which leads to a larger
Self-storage
tract.
could be one of those uses, but frankly, the bottom left and the bottom right are not specific to self-storage. It's really changing the ability of a developer to seek a separate approval from the board, a development agreement, to modify standards for any of the development that's following those standards. And the residential and the non-residential follow the standards in section 3.4.2 and 3.4.3. This, I apologize if we didn't get off on the right foot, but this text amendment is really 2 major things. One about freeing up or allowing self-storage enclosed in more zoning districts and making it a standalone commercial use as opposed to it's a form of light industrial.
Mhm.
And then all of this language here about a development agreement option in the mixed-use zoning districts. There's really 2 components here, really not related to one another, but they could be related by a developer who seeks to kind of combine a zoning district, because the self-storage use would be allowed in NC. That's one of the mixed-use zoning districts. So if they sought to perform self-storage at NC and then sought a development agreement within an NC property, then they could be doing self-storage within an NC property as part of a development agreement. But that project's going to be a mixed-use project, most likely a single-family or attached subdivision with a non-residential component.
All right.
It's
Anyone
2
else?
text amendments, and I say that, could have been 2 separate text amendments. But the applicant brought their request to change the LDO in a package of sorts.
All right.
So I think I would feel more comfortable if we were to separate these because it leaves it very ambiguous, and I think there's lots of room for interpretation.
Well, this certainly is not an omnibus bill where you're changing 100 different things at once, and a comma here, a T here, but it's very two distinct things. But really, the only crossover is kind of what I just went over. If one were to do self-storage enclosed in NC zoning district, and you did a development agreement in the NC zoning district, would a developer be taking advantage of both of these changes that are being proposed here?
I just think that's something to consider.
And developer agreement really gives the commissioners another opportunity to look and really refine these projects.
Absolutely.
To get it to.
Of course, it would be open-ended for the applicant to propose whatever they wanted to do in that development agreement. Again, you could do a development agreement just to change building setbacks, one little standard, and that could be reducing them from 10 foot to 5 foot. So not a big ask, but the development agreement is the only mechanism currently in the LDO that you could do this. And this would be expanding that opportunity to all of the standards in the mixed-use zoning districts. Recall my introduction, right now development agreement is in the mixed-use zoning districts, but only under the timing of development. So you can get 50% of the house permits before you have to deliver some of the non-residential buildings, that ratio of non-residential and residential. So this would be expanding it greatly to allow the developer to ask for a development agreement to modify any of those standards in there.
One more thing I want to ask. The properties on Main Street, the GC properties on Main Street, you said they're not that big, but a developer could come in and add storage on those spaces.
If this text amendment as written were approved.
And we're trying to protect as much of Main Street corridor as we possibly can.
And that gets to
And that gets to my point
Board member
about Main
proceeding.
Street, nothing on Main Street, but as much as we decide to not necessarily adhere strictly to our future land use map, right? That means any property is game for anything, because if they find a piece of property that's a block off of, Main Street, they'll, even if it's residential low, or it doesn't matter what it's zoned on, if somebody feels zoning, or somebody feels a storage unit's gonna work there, they'll ask for it to be rezoned. That happens every single time we see a project come through. So it's, kind of looking at what's currently GC is a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit misleading. It just means that at the moment in time, it just can't happen like that because,
At the
that's already
moment in
zoned.
time, but I think that keeping in mind as a board, that land is very limited and our Main Street is very precious. And that
Right.
we have to really be cognizant of what goes on there.
Right.
I think that we are starting to look at things a little bit differently now.
Right.
Not only Main Street, but the areas around it leading to Main Street as
Right.
well. So, I think that's something to think about.
Yep.
Where those areas are and what we're just allowing with,
And that's one of the reasons why the caveat of having it not have frontage on Main Street matters, because then it doesn't matter what it is currently or future going to be zoned as. You just can't do it along that corridor that we do find so precious.
yeah.
So that's kind of why that kind of offsets that worry about what is it, anything currently zoned as, or what the future land use map is. It doesn't really matter, because you put that condition on it, so you can't put it facing on Main Street, frontage on Main Street.
At least not directly
Right.
adjacent.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
All right. Anyone else have questions for staff? Comments? Discussions?
No, I'll read the motion if he moves
All
the
right.
slide over so I can read it
Floor
properly.
floor is open.
Chairman Moss, just to remind you, the applicant is here. Were there any questions for the applicant?
I asked previously, there weren't any. Anyone else have questions for the
I
applicant?
don't have any.
Last chance for the applicant to speak. Okay, anything you'd like to
You
add?
should be asking?
We're fine with, if you guys want to put restriction on Main Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, our project's not on Main Street, and we would be in complete agreement, and from a development standpoint, Main Street's not a good place to put a storage unit anyway, because it needs to be surrounded by residential houses in order to make it viable.
Okay.
Main
Right.
Street really doesn't have that.
Right.
Would you mind stating your name and address for the, because I know he's going to want me to have that on the record. If you could just state it.
Thanks for letting us speak. We appreciate it. My name is David Schmidt. I live in Apex at 1132 Goliath Lane. This is for the 105 acres that's at the intersection of Averitt Road and Wade Avenue. So it has nothing to do with the downtown area. But we would agree with the comments that have been made. It's not an appropriate place to put it in a downtown area. We just finished our Sweetwater project, which is 413 houses and 45 acres of commercial. And if you get a chance to go over and take a look at it, you ought to. It's pretty special. There's a 2-minute, 40-second video online to give you an idea of what we envision small towns to look like. So if you want to protect the downtown area, it's very appropriate here.
Does that Sweetwater development have this storage in it?
No.
Do any of your developments have storage in it?
Not at this point. There's a particular spot in this project that's adjacent to, Corey, you want to come back up, if you would, please? I'll let him, because I'll go ahead and sign this, but I'll let you kind of go over that.
I didn't know we were getting into the location, but
I may just remind the board that, remember, this text amendment is not connected to any particular property. So what they're sharing is certainly helpful, but please keep in mind that
we were
they can certainly answer.
we were just in favor of.
Yes, you can
protecting
certainly
Main
answer.
Street. That's where I was going to go.
I'm just,
Certainly
yes.
in favor of it.
Please feel free to continue talking. I just want to make sure that we're remembering that this applies to everything.
Correct.
Thank you for saying that, and I don't want to muddy any water, so
That's okay.
I'll save that for another.
Okay, all right. Are there any other questions we can answer for you?
All right.
Something on their office. The nice thing about a development agreement, and we've had this conversation with staff, it gives the town the obligation to make the change, but not the right to make the change, but not the obligation to make it. So you have the flexibility. If the town decides they don't like the change being proposed, they can turn it down. So there's flexibility from that standpoint. It isn't a guaranteed right, I guess is the point.
All right, thank you. If there are no other questions, the floor is open.
I'll move to, I forget the language, I know we're starting to get real specific on it now, so would you mind advancing the slide to the recommendation, please, so I can get it right?
And Mike provided earlier several of the ways that it's related to the comp plan, so you all have seen those and how.
Right. So motion to recommend approval of TA 2506 to the Town Board of Commissioners because it is consistent with the comprehensive plan with the additional language to be written that would disallow frontage on Main Street.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second. Oh, Frank Pierce.
All right, Mr. Pierce. All right, any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, on to the regular agenda, item number 2, the 10-year affordable housing plan.
Thank you, guys.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. We have the 10-year affordable housing plan. So a little history on the plan. The town of Rolesville has undergone significant changes in recent years, experiencing rapid population growth and housing development as it matures alongside the nearby state capital in Raleigh. However, as the town's population has grown, so has the housing cost. With limited variety in the housing mix, in part due to a restrictive development code, there are limited options for current or future Rolesville residents that would be considered affordable for a vast majority of family and household types. To address these challenges, the town of Rolesville has partnered with TPMA to gather data, engage stakeholders, and analyze current trends to develop strategies that will guide the future of housing in Rolesville. The 10-year affordable housing plan contains the results of these efforts. So a summary of findings, between 2013 and 2023, both Wake County and Rolesville have experienced rapid population growth. Rolesville has an affluent population, but is still experiencing affordability issues. 44% of survey respondents with a household income below $100,000 reported difficulty affording their housing costs. Rolesville's housing mix is 90% single-family detached homes, and the June 2024 median home sale price was $639,500. A lack of housing diversity affects the ability to attract younger families, house senior residents, and attract a workforce for essential services. There are very few multifamily units and rental options in Rolesville currently, with a predominance of high-cost single-family homes that could put the town at risk in an event of an economic downturn. So a summary of goals and strategies. Goal number 1 is to plan for the future of housing. The first strategy is to establish a vision for growth, collectively, all together, with residents' opinions, everybody's opinions together, moving forward in unison. Consider establishing an affordable housing fund. Explore possibilities for expanding infrastructure, which would hence incentivize development and may make the units more affordable. Goal number 2, diversify the housing mix. Amend the LDO to allow for greater variety of housing types. Identify areas best suited for denser development. Create more opportunities for rental housing. Consider development fee waivers to encourage affordable housing development. And on that note, I had a meeting with Wake County last week, and they are more than happy to provide educational training on affordable housing to the residents and the boards as well. Goal number 3, focus efforts on developing a housing ecosystem. Participate in regional housing efforts. Wake County is updating their affordable housing plan currently as well. So we have been involved in that. Engage with local builders and developers. Many home builders have affordable housing models, and developers do as well. Develop and launch public education campaigns. Like I said earlier, Wake County Affordable Housing would be more than happy to collaborate with us on that. Housing plan. The consistency of this plan, it is consistent with a comprehensive plan, which includes a major recommendation to create a diversity of new homes while ensuring high quality and limited locations for multifamily units. The 10-year affordable housing plan's goal 2 is to diversify Rolesville's housing mix. Staff recommends approval of the 10-year affordable housing plan due to the elements of consistency noted above. Do you all have any questions?
I've got a couple comments I can make. I think it's interesting how little this does with actually addressing the creation of any kind of programs. There's only one, out of all the goals, there's only one recommendation that involves any sort of thing that leans toward that, and that's the one goal that talks about creating the affordable housing fund. Affordable housing programs can include rental assistance, homeownership assistance, and financial aid for building and rehabilitating affordable housing units. None of that's talked about in here. One of the goals that was mentioned, work with developers and builders to better understand the limitations and potential solutions and incentives to build affordable housing. I don't know when we've had a developer ever come in here wanting to do anything like that. So I don't understand how that really helps the situation when it comes to creating affordable housing. One of the other goals, prioritize higher density and mixed-use development. I'm not a big fan of, encouraging more dense development in Rolesville right now. I don't know how but I don't know how anyone would expect this town to maintain its small town feel if all we're doing is building more density, especially in the infrastructure that we already struggle with being able to handle, or being very concerned about traffic in the future. So higher density and mixed-use development gets me a little bit worried about that being part of the solution here. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good stuff and there's a lot of good research that's needed to understand a lot of this stuff. I mean, you got at the first 24 pages is a lot of information, all good and very helpful information, not taking anything away from that. Like I said, the Affordable Housing Fund is really appropriate, and I think that's one of the steps that should be more focused on is creating programs that help people get into places. Because any of these other things that have been talked about, an incentive for a developer or educating the developer, waiving fees, you think that that's going to actually carry over to the buyer? And they're just going to pocket those incentives, pocket the lower cost or whatever it is. They're not going to pass that on to the buyer, at least in my opinion and from my experience. But what I found a little bit more concerning about some aspects of the report was the fact that some of these recommendations were based on towns and cities that are 10 times the size of Rolesville. South Bend, Indiana, which I am very familiar with. I've been there a number of times. I've been in there. I know what South Bend, Indiana looks like. There's a lot of nicknames I cannot repeat in public for what South Bend, Indiana looks like. But I will say, and that's no offense to South Bend, Indiana out there, I'm just saying it's got a little bit of a reputation that's stuck around for a while. That's got 109,000 people, and they're making recommendations off of that size when we're barely at 12,000. Same thing with Austin, Texas. They're at 99,000 residents, and they're 10 times our size. So I feel like the recommendations that those cities are incorporating aren't really apples to apples when it comes to Rolesville, its size, what we have. South Bend, Indiana, once 100 years ago was a farming town, but it's not anymore. We are still a farming town. You can drive down Main Street and see crops, right? So, you know, we are still a small town, and I just don't see a lot of these recommendations keeping us that way, when what we really need is the kinds of things that happened in Wake Forest in the 70s and 80s when New Hope Village came along. Those are single-story ranch affordable housing communities. I haven't seen a single-story house in Rolesville built since I've been here. So we don't have communities that are being built for affordable housing. We have developers coming in and saying, hey, well, we'll take one $300,000 townhome and we'll make it $250,000 to make it affordable. That's not what an affordable housing program is from where I come from. And and even from the first home that I bought through affordable housing program, that's not how it worked. So there's just too many things that don't answer a lot of questions, in my opinion. It's a good start, don't get me wrong, but there's just too many things that are red flags for me with the way they were recommended.
Yeah, I understand that. We could definitely, give your feedback and shoot it back at the consultant at TPMA, and he could adjust, reevaluate. I believe it was your second comment. The folks at Wake County, they sent me a couple of case studies on how Apex and Morrisville are doing their kind of affordable housing. Apex it's more required as a part of their development review. Like they say, okay, 5% of these 100 homes have to be affordable. And I assume it's based on location. Downtown it may be 10, 15%. Outside in a suburban area it may be 5. But yeah, you do have very good points, and we will move forward accordingly.
Yeah, and I participated in these focus groups, and I gave them a lot of this feedback. I really was expecting to have a program outlined in some way, shape, or form in here, not just a bunch of recommendations, but an actual start of a program that helps people get into housing. Because that's what affordable housing programs are from my experience and from where I come from, not just a bunch of, moving the ink around, so.
And as I've been a part of Wake County's affordable housing plan process, they have had a lot of more, especially nonprofit involvement, like Salvation Army, Habitat for Humanity.
Right.
And I think just the lack of nonprofits' presence in Rolesville may have kind of adversely affected those programs.
Very possibly, yeah.
So, and I was also trying to look back through my notes to see what the actual purpose of the committee was. And I did see one thing where they were seeking a better understanding of our housing ecosystem across the town, but was part of their objective to provide us with a plan?
So from my understanding, I came across this plan later in the process, after a draft was already established. But from my understanding, this is very high-level, general plan. As you move forward, like I was looking at the city of Richmond in Virginia's affordable housing plan, and I want to say it's their 4th or 5th version, and it's like, okay, in section 6.2.b, make this adjustment, change this to include this type of housing, or change the setback requirements or the lot dimensions. But from my understanding, this plan is just a very high level to get, okay, we have an affordable housing plan, let's take these smaller steps, and in 5 years, revisit this plan and see what we have done and see what we can do to improve it.
I will say that there was a lot, as Derek said, a lot of very good information in here. And I think it will help us understand what Rolesville actually does need in order to be sustainable, since we only have the majority of the single-family homes. So I think that information in here and outlining what could happen and what we have to be aware of was very helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I understand this is a plan, is just a plan of recommendations. At what point do we begin making these items regulatory? Like, if there are incentives, tying that to a developer agreement, saying you have to do 10% or 5% of the lots. At what point do we start making that regulatory rather than just looking at recommendations on paper?
I am not 100% sure. I mean, that would have to come from the Board of Commissioners and hence you all. I'm not 100% sure, but I think, like Apex, for example, it's a part of their LDO, or they may have UDO, but that would come from or derive from a text amendment, which I assume would be staff initiated.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of, the bird, I forget the saying. Mike, you always say it, the bird chasing the apple. Something like that. Yeah, the cart and the horse. Because it's kind of like, it's board initiated, staff led, kind of something in that nature, but it's also those growing pains. Like you said, it is a great question. When do we start doing this? Mm-hmm. And I think the purpose of this plan is to realize and say, hey, when do we want to start doing this? Should we do it now? Should we wait a year? When should we do it? And I think that's part of the goal number one, create the vision. What should we collectively do? What's everybody's opinion? Let's make it all uniform and move forward together.
And I think once it becomes regulatory, that'll solve a lot of your questions about, giving incentives so they're not, so the developers aren't keeping them, they're passing them along.
That's true, but my concern is what I've seen in this town and many others is when you create a plan, that's the guideline for the town to follow. And if the plan doesn't have any mention of affordable housing programs, then they'll never talk about it and it will never come to fruition. That's why I'm adamant about having something like that in this plan, because if you don't say you want it, then no one's going to dream it up in a conversation on the side. You know what I mean? That's what I mean. So it's a valid point, but if it's not in the plan, it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's what my concern is.
Tonight, are you looking for recommendations for us to take back to the consultant to have them add things into this affordable housing plan, or what's the goal tonight?
I mean, I assume you certainly can do that. I would let Aaron weigh in on that.
My understanding is they were looking for a recommendation to take this to the Board of Commissioners. Again, in the same way that we handle a lot of our other items, I would think that adding very specific feedback of things that you would like to see implemented in there as part of your recommendation would be helpful. Yes.
I'm sorry, even next steps. Are there next steps? What are the next steps, or?
Well, I think that's what the goals are, and some of the stuff that's outlined in the plan are kind of communicating what to do next. But none of it speaks to creating programs for buying housing assistance or rental assistance or development assistance. None of that's detailed. And again, that's kind of what, what I get worried about is when you leave stuff out like that, then it never comes up in a conversation. And then everything is focused on, let's modify this text amendment to do this, or let's go make the zoning so there's more density over here, but none of that's addressing how the heck you get people in a house that's in downtown Rolesville, a townhome that's in downtown Rolesville that costs $400,000 when they can only afford $300,000. We need an affordable housing fund to pay that $100,000 for that person to move in that house with various conditions that that person meets. Stay here 5 years, maintain the property, all that kind of business, That's what I get worried about.
I do believe that it's also on Eric's list. Are you familiar with or no?
With?
That is on his list, the affordable housing plan to be able to afford affordable housing.
This definitely topic is not a one and done with this plan right here.
Of course, of course.
I apologize, I'm not answering your question.
That's okay.
But I envision this all as this is the tip of the pyramid, not a linear directive of here's a plan, let's make some LDO changes, and let's put it in effect. Let's have people come forth and rezone a property, and now they have to do 10% affordable units according to whatever we do. So it's not a linear thing. I feel this is like the tip of the iceberg. We've done our first study in this very small town, and it's gonna, and all those policies and suggestions or whatever, those could go to some next levels. One of those ultimately has to be regulatory, because it's just plans,
Right.
it's just policies without the teeth, rubber hitting the road. So eventually it's gonna have to lend itself to either a standalone ordinance of law that says developers have to do X to achieve some of these goals, even if the X is working with established partners who do this affordable housing program as a profession, the county, the nonprofits, et cetera. Or the town creates its own, which would be a massive undertaking unto itself to administer any of this, getting into
Especially with only 10,000
funds and monies and rebates and, all of those things, to ensure that the homeowners ultimately get the benefit of the development breaks that we give the developer, to your point. They swallow them up in the end.
That's why it's about homeowners. It's not about developers. It's not about ordinances. About the only way to make anything affordable is to give people money. I mean, that's how things become affordable. And then you tie. Never mind. I won't get on my.
So we just think of this as this is the start. This is not a linear path to an end.
I don't think it's a start, though. I think it's a very strategic framework where we're not being specific and defining what affordable housing means to Rolesville.
Yeah.
What do we want? What are the specifics? These are goals, but what are the goals for the community? Like, what does that look like? And I think that's what's missing here.
I agree, but I also believe that this is the very first document just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because we all were like, okay, what does affordable housing mean? What does it mean to Rolesville? What does it look like in Rolesville? We didn't have a clue, all this information that's been given us. So I think this is the first step of many, but now we need to outline what.
But I agree with what Tanner just said. We are putting the cart before the horse because this, to me, would come after we've already made that first step of defining what affordable housing is, what type of initiative we want to accomplish, and then we place this as our framework to execute.
I see it as beneficial because it's telling us what we do need in Rolesville to be sustainable. And we could have made up anything. We could have said whatever we want to see in Rolesville and it not be feasible for Rolesville to continue to grow. You see what I'm saying? So I can see both sides.
I can see both
of the coin,
sides.
but we are here now.
Yeah.
So what's our next step?
I would like to see some more substance to this document before I feel comfortable saying that this is the affordable plan that we want to present.
Is the consultant complete, is this a complete first step, or is this kind of, hey, what else do we need?
So it was complete. We had, I forget what month it was, maybe May. We had the public comment open for around 45 days on this plan, and no edits came from that. It was a lot of misconceptions or mixed opinions on the plan and what affordable housing is in general. So it wasn't really any. Most of the comments were about that specifically, or people's opinions on affordable housing, instead of in chapter 2 of this plan, I don't like this description, change this to this, add more housing programs.
I gave that feedback, trust me. I gave
Okay.
that feedback.
Well, it was shared with the consultant.
And I agree with everything you were saying also, but I said, what's happening here is the generations now, and several, but they can't afford to come back here. They grow up here, their parents are here, but they cannot afford to come back to Roseville. Nobody, you look at all the people that have grown up here, graduated, they cannot come back to Roseville. They go to Apex, Clayton, other areas, because they're offering affordable, they're offering, purchase, they're renting with a purchase to, or option to own and that type of thing. But so I agree. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the interesting thing about our geography is we have so much land that's in the Little River Reservoir, watershed, right? So you can't go out there and put, these large subdivisions in those areas. And those are prime areas that I would have thought this consulting company would have looked at and said, hey, anywhere on the east side, right? Am I right? East side of Averitt Road, for example, right? Rather than those. I mean, I'm not suggesting we get rid of farmland. I'm just giving examples here, so don't bite my head off when I talk about farmland. But if that were to get developed, most of that's going to wait until those $900,000, really nice country homes on 2 acres. I mean, that's going to wait for that, right? But that land is also ideal for these single-story ranch types of houses that you can fit a lot more of those in on those smaller lots with well and septic, and none of those developments are coming in because we don't have anything that says, here's a program, that says, hey, bring in single-family, one-story ranch houses. I mean, look at what Rolesville started with in the 70s and 80s. Brown Circle, Perry Farm, Jonesville, those are all one-story ranches, right? And that's what made the town affordable at that point in time. And so that's what I just wish I saw something more in this document that said, here's where we can do these types of programs. Here's the type of program that helps with financial assistance, and here's where we can put the housing that they can afford with that program. And that's what's completely missing from this, in my opinion.
Yeah, and on that note, the comp plan has extensively looked at that, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from developers and other people that said, like cottage courts or, kind of clustery subdivisions on mass well and septic, just kind of looking at the feasibility of that and the feasibility of the watershed. The development community, they were like, make like wedding venues, do unique kind of like create like a boutique style community of the land in the watershed, because it is very limited in its development potential.
But just keep in mind, and I don't mean to be a hater here, but just keep in mind, developers need to make money.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get that there's incentives for developers to offer these kinds of communities, but they're also going to be looking at their bottom line first. So again, that's where I get back to where you have to have some sort of financial assistance, whether it's for the buyer and or for the developer, in order for some of this stuff to work. And again, I don't see any of that in this plan, so.
So if we were to give feedback, I think we all are kind of saying the same things here, that we want to see some more concrete documentation. And the comps, I don't think those are fair comps. That might be some specific feedback we could give to the consultant.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other comments or discussion on this?
So I'll pause to say, more steak, less sizzle.
What's that? Yeah. That's probably another analogy, since we're on analogies tonight, right?
Yeah. So live rent-free in my head the rest of the week, thanks.
We are looking for a motion, though, and a recommendation to the board of this item.
I guess the recommendation could be to add the items they've mentioned.
Absolutely, yeah, and we'll listen to the minutes and bulletize those out,
And would that be recommendations to the commissioners? Approval with those recommendations, or I guess you could motion it any way you'd like.
I mean, I'm willing to make a motion, but I can tell you where it's going to go. I don't know if everybody else wants it, but since no one's saying anything, I'll say it. I don't care. So I make a motion to deny the 10-year affordable housing plan because the report is inconsistent with the I don't know how consistent it is with the comprehensive plan, but it is based on reasons set forth in the staff report. I don't know if I'm supposed to say inconsistent or not, but I don't know if that matters. I don't know if it has to be, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if it has to be.
You can say that it's consistent, but
Okay.
recommend.
I can still make a denial
Denial.
with the consistency.
But I would clarify and list out the things that the reasons that
Okay.
you are the things you would like to see changed.
All right, well, is it going to be worth it? Okay, all right. So where is that statement I was reading?
It's right here.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, okay. I'll make a motion to deny the 10-year affordable housing plan because although the report is consistent with the comprehensive plan based on the reasons set forth with staff, I feel the report does not address any focus on types of programs for financial assistance. I don't think the plan addresses any geographical or, I don't know how to say what I'm saying, but other opportunities for developers in locations. And I think the comparisons being made are inappropriate for a town of 10,000 people. I guess that's close enough.
Okay.
It's my motion, I guess.
We have a motion for denial. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second for denial. All in favor of the denial, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Aye.
Okay, so
No, that's 4 in favor of denial and 2 against. All right, I guess we're on to communications.
All right, Planning Director's report. Well, we'll start off with some staff updates. Meredith Gruber has transitioned to the senior planner for the town's planning department. I've been asked to be the interim planning director for the interim. The planning director position is out there advertised and will be filled eventually. The planning department also was funded for an administrative assistant position for this fiscal year, and we hope that job listing goes out very, very, very soon, and we can have somebody in that seat. Maybe by Labor Day, that'd be wonderful, but certainly by this fall. So our department will grow 7 funded positions, I think it is, and 6 full. And then as the planning director and or assistant planning director positions get filled, we'll be at full staff then. So hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be full staffed and everybody will be settled into their new roles. Some of the bigger picture updates that have happened probably since we met last month, and I probably gave you a little bit of tidbits of here and there, what's going on. Just this morning, the Parker Ridge project, which is on both sides of Redford Place Drive, if you go down that way past the Food Line Shopping Center, they had their pre-vertical permitting meeting today for the first 68 townhomes that have been, those lots have been recorded. Those are on the Food Line side of the Redford Place Circle area, if you're familiar. So we could see vertical development starting in September, they said. And they did indicate kind of a slow development. So being townhomes, they get permits for one building, they'll build one whole entire building, kind of obviously. But they didn't seem to be indicating they're going to drop 3 buildings at once and start vertical with that. If you look down the road here at the Walbrook townhomes, those folks are doing over 30 permits a month, submittal and activation. That is going up like lightning over there. These folks at Parker Ridge, the funny thing is the building constructor is Lennar for both projects. But the gist of both projects are very, very different. At least Parker Ridge, I guess, is saying we're going to get off on a slow start and kind of build that. So you might just see.
Just a quick question in that respect. So is the impression that they're going to build and ask for certificates of occupancies before they start another building?
They didn't get into that level. They just kind of indicated the speed of building permit submittals and processing and so forth. And they kind of said that because, again, being Lennar, being the same one that's been submitting permits for this other project, that's been exceedingly fast.
Right.
And so as staff and the applicant were speaking, they just kind of indicated a slower roll to Parker Ridge than what's been happening with the Walbrook townhomes, just as an example.
Okay, all right.
2 weeks ago, I think 2 Mondays ago, Staff and the applicant for Walbrook held pre-construction meetings for the 7-Eleven project and the Hall of Fame Car Wash. So these are on different sides of Main Street here, but both will basically entail some new land disturbance, so areas where it's all trees, those will be disturbed for the first time. So it's been a long time since really trees have gone down across the Walbrook project. So those will be 2 new areas. One is almost quite literally across the road here. You can see it right here. That area is where the Hall of Fame Car Wash will go. They're going to clear a site that's actually 2 lots. Hall of Fame will go on the one, and then the other one will be then prepped for development. There is no end user submitted yet.
I thought Hall of Fame was across the street and Tidal Wave was on this side.
That is correct. Yeah, sorry. I'm looking out the door across Main Street.
Okay, I got you. All right.
The south of across the, that is where Hall of Fame is, yes.
Okay.
You're right. There's a separate car wash project called Tidal Wave that's achieved site development.
Yeah, it'll be
It's that
across the
Grand
street.
Park Circle,
Yeah,
at the hard corner of
but
Grand
that
Park
one,
Circle.
there's no movement on that one yet. I know,
We're waiting for them to,
okay. Oh, they're waiting on something. They're waiting from the city, I think.
they might have a utility snafu.
Yeah,
They have
yeah.
not yet held the pre-construction meeting with town, which is usually very soon before they break ground. But they have their site plan approved. So again, 2 exciting projects there, some new areas at Walbrook that will be breaking ground before the end of the year. They showed no earlier intent.
So they should break ground before the end of the year.
Generally, they indicated that, but again, it is still July as well. So it's not too soon, but not too long. And on the August 5th Board of Commissioner meeting, Planning Department is up again for an update, so I don't want to say too many things here. I want to save some things for that in a week. So we hope to do a planning and economic development. I think we'll tag the team up for that one and give a lengthier update about what's been going on the last quarter or so of the year. So that is my report.
All right, thank you.
I have one quick question. How did the meeting with the city Raleigh go with respect to the greenway easement for the water tower?
I'm not familiar.
Not familiar with that one? Okay.
All right. Anyone else have questions for staff? Okay, on to the town attorney's report.
I don't have anything really to report. Thank you all again for always being thoughtful about the decisions we're making at the recommendations we're making, I should say, at this stage. But that's all I have to say. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Is there any other business? Nope. Hearing none, I will go on to the last item on the agenda, adjournment.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
All right, we have a motion for adjournment. Is there a second? Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing none, we're adjourned.
Thank you all.
They finally stopped